Yes, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings, my name is Toran Sagobar Ismail. This video was made to fulfill a certain task given by our lecturer related to the course of methodology in TESOL. In this video, I would like to explain about several things that EFL teachers should understand before teaching English to EFL students. The main principles in EFL teaching. So basically, there are three main principles in EFL teaching that I'm going to explain in this video. The first and the most important principle in EFL teaching that EFL teachers should understand is the concept of teaching language as communication. And the second one involves the classroom management. And the third is the kinds of teaching materials that can be applied in EFL teaching. The first principle that I'm going to explain is the concept of teaching language as communication. From the sentence itself, we can see that there are two different variables, the teaching activity and the concept of language as a means of communication. From the second variable, we can see that uh, English can be used as a means of communication to learn other people's culture. How do we teach this kind of concept to EFL students? How do we make the EFL students realize that the objective of English learning is to communicate uh, in written form of communication and spoken form of communication? The answer to this question is for EFL teachers to do a communicative classroom. The primary goal of the communicative classroom itself is to develop the students' communicative competence that involves written form communicative competence and spoken form of communicative competence. And as you can see in the screen, there are four different skills of communicative competence that students can develop. The grammatical and the discourse competence are categorized as written communicative competence, while sociocultural and strategic competence are categorized as spoken communicative competence. The grammatical competence is the ability to understand English vocabularies, word order, and word pronunciations, while the discourse competence is the ability to interconnect a series of utterances or sentences in a text. Within the discourse competence are coherence and cohesion. The coherence is the ability to understand relations of sentences in a text, while the cohesion is the ability to understand the links between sentences in a text. The third communicative competence is sociocultural competence. It is the ability that the students can use English in social context or cultural interaction. For example, how to greet someone, how to ask permissions, to express opinions, and etc. And the last communicative competence is strategic competence. It is the ability to problem solve or restore communication failure. For example, I'm sorry, I didn't get what you said before. Can you repeat that again? Something like that. And then what what activities can EFL teachers do to make the students interact in English? There are two types of activities that EFL teachers can do to make the students interact in English within the classroom. Pre-communicative activities and communicative activities. The pre-communicative activities, as the name suggests, it can also be considered as warming up activities before going to the main communicative activities. This activity allows the teacher to isolate specific elements of knowledge or skills that compose a communicative ability. There are two types of activities that are categorized as pre-communicative activities: the structural activities and quasi-communicative activities. The structural activities focus on the English grammar and vocabularies, while quasi-communicative activities focus on how the language is used to communicate meaning. For example, in structural activity, the teacher is trying to teach English vocabularies and how to construct words into sentences in a simple word order that involves subject, predicate, and object. For example, the teacher shows an image of an object to the students and asks them, for example, the image is a cake, and while showing the picture to the classroom, the teacher asks, "Do you like cake?" In this activity, the teacher are trying to teach English vocabularies and how to construct words into sentences. And then, after concluding the structural activities, the teacher then can move on to quasi-communicative activities by giving another example of sentence to answer the question. After asking, "Do you like cake?" then the teacher give another example of sentence. "Yes, I do." Uh, so that the teacher is trying to build a conversation for the students to practice them in the main communicative activities by their friends. So these are the types of activities that teachers can provide within the classroom to make the students interact in English. And next is some of the contributing factors that uh, influence the successful rate of creating a communicative classroom. First is teacher centrality reduction. I believe you'll agree that in Curriculum 2013, the Learning Center focused on the students' activities. This does not mean that the teacher should give all the control of the classroom activities to the students. The teacher also holds the responsibility to control the flow of the learning process by giving clear instructions, mm, uh, by explaining what kind of activities are going to be done within the classroom, and monitoring the students, keeping them focused on the learning process. The teacher plays an important part to control the flow of the learning process. And then the students' individual appreciation. The teacher holds the responsibility to identify and understand the students' characteristic and personality. This way, the teacher can improve the chance to attract the students' attention, to engage in the learning process, and to motivate them to engage in the learning process. And then the teacher have to give the students a chance to express themselves uh, by asking if they have questions or if they have personal opinions about the material that has been taught, meaning the teacher gives student chance to clarify the students' understanding about the material that has been taught. And then the teacher also plays an important role in AFL learning. The first is as an assessor. The teacher holds the responsibility to learn the students' goals and interests of learning English. This way, the teacher can decide what kinds of learning strategies are best suited for the students. And then, as a text adapter, the teacher also holds the responsibility to bring other material outside the textbook. For example, by bringing authentic materials, the teacher can improve the chance to make the students' uh, attention to engage in the learning process. And then, as a classroom manager, as the most powerful person in the classroom, the teacher holds the power to influence the kinds of activities that can be done within the classroom. The teacher also holds the authority to handle affective variable of classroom's life. For example, the students' condition. Are they in motivated condition or less motivated condition? The teacher uh, have the obligation to deal with these kinds of problems so that there will be meaningful interaction from the teacher and the students. And then as an entertainer, the entertainment the FL teacher produces within the classroom can be used to lower the students' anxiety level of speaking English. The students' feeling of uneasiness, the lack of self-confidence, and the fear of peer criticism are the kinds of obstacles that the students face that can be lowered or maybe dissolved by the entertainment the effort teachers produce. And next, I'm going to explain the second principle in EFL teaching, which is classroom management. The classroom management refers to the way the teacher organizes what goes on in the classroom, and what kinds of activities are going to be done within the classroom. The primary goal of the classroom management itself is to create a conducive classroom atmosphere for the students to interact in English so that they can progress the learning outcome. There are 6 elements in classroom management. The first is the teacher's talk. Some of you probably think of an old traditional learning approach where the learning center focuses on the teacher's talk. The teacher gives long explanations about abstract ideas which make the students become a passive learner. This is not necessarily true. The teacher's talk holds the power to control the flow of the learning process. For example, by giving clear instructions, the teacher can decide what kinds of activities are best suited for the students. And then within the teacher's talk, the teacher can also share some real life experiences related to English so that it can be used to motivate and draw the students' attention to actively engage in the learning process. And the second element in classroom management is the teacher's questions. By understanding questioning behavior, the teacher can improve the chance to establish a meaningful interaction between the teacher and the students. There are 2 types of questions that teacher can ask within the classroom: display questions and referential questions. Uh, Display questions is a type of question that teacher can ask to the students to assess and clarify the students' understanding of the material that has been taught. And referential questions is a type of questions that uh, bring real life questions. It's a type of real life questions. For example, the teacher can ask the student, what do you do in the morning? By bringing real life questions, the students can be more attracted to engage in the learning process. This question asks the private life of the students, then the students can be attracted to answer this question. And then the types of activities that can be done and best suited for the students. There are whole class activities, small group activities, uh, work in pairs, or individual activities, such as what I'm doing right now, individual presentation. And then the fourth element in classroom management is instructions. As I repeatedly mentioned, that by giving clear instructions, the teacher can decide what kinds of activities can be done in the classroom or uh, by giving clear instructions, the teacher can also control the flow of the learning process. And then to keep students on task, how to keep students focused on the learning process. For example, in small group activities, there are some cases where some students didn't give enough contribution to the teamwork. In this case, the teacher can give some additional assignment or a special assignment to that case students, so that uh, yeah, the each students can focus on the learning process. And then the comprehensible language use. As a superior person who possess a superior skill in English knowledge, we need to match and synchronize our level of understanding to students' level understanding by choosing the appropriate vocabularies or the right context. The teacher can improve the chance. I mean, so the students can understand what we are trying to teach by matching and synchronizing our level of understanding with the students. And then the possible steps to create learning setting. The first is to pay attention to students as children when students as condition. Um, the moment we stepped into the classroom, we have to pay attention to students' condition or the classroom condition. Are they in fresh physically and motivated condition, or are they in exhausted or less motivated conditions? This is crucial to decide the next step in creating a learning setting, which is adjusted speech. After observing the students' condition, uh, if they are in motivated condition, we can adjust the speech of our teaching process to fast speed, so that the students can keep focus on the material that is being taught. And then if they are in less motivated condition or in exhausted condition, for example, after sport class, we can adjust the speed of our teaching speech in slow, so that the teacher can, I mean, the so that the students can catch up and understand what we are trying to teach. And then the last step to create a learning setting is to check the students' comprehension. By the end of the meeting, the teacher can ask questions to clarify the students' understanding. How they uh, do they understand with the material that has been taught or not? And then the third and the last principles in Efl teaching, which is the kinds of teaching materials that can be applied in Efl teaching. In this video, I would like to explain about authentic materials. Authentic materials is a teaching material that connects with real life in implementation. There are four types of authentic materials. The first is listening or viewing, or usually known as audiovisual material, the visual material, printed material, and realia. For example, in audiovisual, we can use movies or movie clips to teach English. And then the second is visual, by bringing something like paintings, photos, or PowerPoint slides, picture slides. We can also use this type of materials to teach English. And next is printed type. For example, newspaper articles, magazines, English. And then realia, as I mentioned before, uh, realia is a type of authentic materials that can draw the students' attention or attract the students to engage in the learning process by bringing, for example, a figure or, yeah, for example, in biology class, the teacher usually bring a figure of human anatomy by explaining the concept of human body. The students it can be attracted to learn and see the figure so that the students will be attracted to engage in the learning process. So this concludes all the explanation that I'm going to explain in this video. Thank you very much and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.